podcast. Man, you know what? It's funny because this is an episode I've been absolutely looking forward to. Like, I know Zach, Sean, and I taking a little bit of a hiatus from the podcast with the transition of myself, graduating from college a couple weeks ago. Super awesome, super excited for the next journey of that. And kicking off this hiatus with an amazing banger of a guest, which we'll get into here in a second. Super excited to introduce him. First, I want to know, Sean and Zach, how are you guys doing? What have you been up to? Talk to me.
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for asking, Yinka. I've had a pretty good week. One of my SMART goals for this year was to take a trip out of the country for the first time ever. And so last night, actually, my wife and I were able to finally press book on those plane tickets. Um, so we're super excited. We've been integrating a little bit of our financial literacy into that. So we saved up a bunch of our credit card points and, over a while. So they were able to pay for our tickets entirely. So it's no sweat off our back. And we're pretty grateful to have this opportunity. So we're excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw the pictures on Instagram. It's very cool.
Thanks.
That's awesome, Zach. I'm happy for you guys. I would say life has been great. Life has been very busy. I myself too took a vacation for about half of last week. Went down to South Carolina and enjoyed some beach time. So I'm getting back into the groove of things. Gonna try to play some golf tomorrow. So all in all, life is great.
That's awesome. No, I love it. I know I can even attest to everything you guys are saying. I've been seeing the pictures on Instagram. I myself, again, taking some breaks. Like I've just mentioned, graduated 2 weeks ago from college, and I'm doing a lot of moving. Right, moving from Ohio, moving myself to Minnesota, where I live, and then Minnesota to Kansas, where I'm, going to be living for my full time job. Just a lot of moving, a lot of moving parts. But I'm excited. Like I'm actually looking forward to just calm down and get some work done because that's my home. Is when I'm in at ease mentally. But all that aside, I appreciate you guys sharing. Man, real quickly, this guest we have on tonight, super excited. I was thinking about this on the way back from dinner tonight. I was like, man, how long have I known this guest? I want to say a little over 2.5 years, if not three, because when I first met him, it was virtually, right? And, initially when I met him, I'm like, this guy, he looks good. He's got a lot of value he's providing to an organization we're part of. We'll get into that a little bit later. And I'm like, he's in a space that I want to get into, right? In terms of like pharmaceutical, in terms of like his career path. I'm like, I want to try to see if I can get him as a mentor. And that I did. Right. And I can just tell like our relationship is super awesome. It's super fun, super free flowing. And then when we do get to meet each other in person, I know it's only been like maybe one, two, probably two times max now. For again, this organization we're a part of, we go to these conferences every year. And every time I meet him, got the biggest smile, super awesome. He's where all the eyes go because he's like the head person of this organization. Again, we'll get into this organization a little bit later. But this individual has provided so much value to my life, especially even too when I was on the FLI grind last summer. Again, as Sean and Zach know, me and this guest, we would have calls probably bi-weekly. He would help me with career development, personal development. He put me on the books, Linchpin. Still remember that book. That book was fire, right? And it's like I just absolutely appreciate the kind of guy this man is because the value he provides, but also his personality and his affability is so unique. And so, without further ado, the guest we have on tonight is Mr. Arthur Edge, my mentor, my friend, amazing associate. Mr. Edge, I know a lot about you. I'm excited to learn more about you again on this front because again, we are the Financial Literacy Institute, and this is On the Fly podcast and FLI podcast. So we're gonna get kind of the financial side. But before we get into that, like I mentioned, I know a lot about you. So can you kind of tell a little bit of Zach, Sean, as well as our listeners, who you are and kind of what you do?
Yeah. Thanks, Yika, and happy to be here and joining you guys on the fly. Been following the Financial Literacy Institute for some time. And Yinka talks about me being his mentor. If we get into this, he really like stalked me to build the relationship, but it's certainly been golden. Yeah, a little about me. So born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, Midwest guy, studied engineering and actually started like interning in the pharma industry a long time ago and then pivoted and said, hey, at that time, pharma companies aren't really saving lives. And I said, I'm going to go into sustainability and kind of pivoted, went into making biofuels for cars and went to grad school for engineering and then said, hey, in grad school, this healthcare thing is kind of cool, and medicine had advanced a long way. And I kind of found myself full circle back in the pharma space. So, I'm currently in the supply chain area, but I've worked in R&D, I've worked in production, a number of different spaces, just really making products that help people. And along the way, also, on my journey, service has been pretty key. And so I spent a lot of my time volunteering and giving back to organizations, which for me is a form of investment. But the returns have been investment in myself as well, and certainly wouldn't have had at least some of the professional successes without those investments. But right now I'm in the DMV area, and yeah, just happy to share any knowledge I have.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And even just one of those last points you mentioned. So number one, I thank you for sharing all that, but that investment into giving back, right? I can attest to that. Like I am a part of that investment. And I appreciate the investment you put in me, your time, your energy, your efforts, and just the value that you have is absolutely unworldly. So I appreciate you, Arthur, for what you do. And again, I'm looking forward to kind of get to know you more on this other level, kind of financially, or even in the past, right? And so, really, speak of that. Let's kind of hop right into it, right? So, one of my first questions I want to ask you, Arthur, is who? And this is a very timely question because as I'm now transferring outside of college or into the real world, as all of my siblings like to say. What who was Arthur back when he graduated college, transitioning from collegiate to the career world? What Who was Arthur? What was he doing? Maybe, and even then, so probably a more pertinent question to finances, right? Do you think you were prepped with that financial knowledge after graduating college? Like, were you ready for it?
Yeah, it's always yes and no. So, I mean, I can remember, graduating from undergrad, and I mentioned I'm from Detroit, and I graduated and like relocated to DC, and it was during the time of then what they called the Great Recession, like 2008, 2009. And so it was a crazy time, right, financially. And, who knows, we're talking about, right, going back into a recession now. But it was really hard to find a job. And I actually took a job making a lot less than what chemical engineers, right, were on average making them because it was just an employer's market. And I even took like a contract job. So I wasn't sure, 3 months, 12 months after starting a role, how it was going to work out. But, kind of took that risk, moved out to the DC, Maryland area, stayed with some family to get acclimated and kind of get on my feet and get settled. And really, like, that was my first time living completely on my own, moving away from home. And, what did I learn? Probably a lot, right? I'm a foodie and enjoy eating out. And I can remember some of my first budgets and tracking expenses and seeing that I was spending literally like thousands of dollars per year on eating out and going to happy hours. And just had to bring that back in, right? Because it's expensive. But that was kind of me, first starting out working and realizing now that I had to pay, all of my bills, et cetera, that I could have taken advantage of some of the funds that I had in undergrad, actually. I mean, for example, I was fortunate to be on scholarship. Um, and so much so that like I was getting refund checks and I was just spending those refund checks like each semester. And now in hindsight, I wish I would have taken some of those funds and bought Amazon stock like then, because I paid a lot more later buying the Amazon stock I have now. um but yeah, I mean, just when you have some excess capital and can spend it more wisely, it's just the time value of money that I didn't appreciate, right, when I first started.
Mhm, mhm. And I love that you shared that, right? And I think a lot of us are in that common boat where, even maybe Zach and Sean can attest, but I can, where we got whether it's refunds or we had some money, but maybe didn't necessarily have the knowledge, and sometimes we just spend it, and that's natural. but then we have that hindsight view of when we do have the knowledge, like, oh, I wish I knew this back then, which I think all of us have those stories. So, what now are you doing to complete? So you already talked about how, you seems like you're an investor, which is awesome. What are some things that Arthur is currently doing right now to continuously set yourself up, maybe set a, future family up? I know you and I are in talks of, you might have a partner. Like, what are some of those financial conversations you're having now, juxtaposed some of the things that you didn't have with conversations with yourself back then?
I'm it's funny because I'm putting like on a mentoring hat here, but all of these conversations are just sharing what you've learned over time. And I'm really big on understanding your strengths and leaning into strengths, right?
Mhm.
And if you have a weakness, that's okay. You just need to block so it doesn't impact you. And so when I think about what I'm doing now, uh, all my analogies are like related to the gym because I've been working out more. But I
Okay.
think about it like flexing your muscles, right? They're different muscles. So you can do a couple of things with money. You can make money, you can save money, or you can grow the money. And like one of my strengths is just making money, right? And kind of being offensive and growing my career to get just higher compensation, right? Moving through my career. And, you know, I lean into that because um, it's a bigger return for me, right? It's one of my strengths. And then on the other side, I just automate the things that I'm not as strong with, right? So it's very easy for me to make additional money. So naturally, I want to spend it. So I'll just automate all the things like savings, the things like donations to charity organizations. I automate, right, payment of my bills and payment of insurance, car insurance, life insurance. I automate, right, my retirement savings and investments. And so all of that just takes care of itself so that I can just lean into the strength of earning more revenue.
And it seems like financial automation, you touched on it a lot. I've noticed as life gets busier, automating your finances so that you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to spend probably more than say 5 minutes a week on it, is a major key to keeping you on track to your goals, but also keeping you at peace with what you're trying to do. And I know it's something that Zach mentions a lot throughout like our social media content, our podcast. It's like there's two ways to improve your finances. Way number one is to make more money. Way number two is to spend less money. Now, in terms of your personal situation, you mentioned that you have had in the past, cases where you like to spend a lot of money. What are some strategies that you've put into place to curb that spending?
Yeah, I mean, I think just learning some of the rules and thumbs and best practices. Then these are widely available, picking up your favorite personal finance book or just Googling, right? Knowing that, especially in expensive places when you might be moving to a city like the DMV area, especially to those who are graduating and moving for new jobs, finding housing that's 30% or less, right, than your take home, right? That's kind of a defensive move that if something happens, right, and let's say, you have to change jobs, there's a period without income, you're not so stressed by your living expenses. And so just applying these first kind of in your budget and then automating taking care of those so you don't have to think about it. And so, that's one practical example with housing. But something else I do, and this isn't for everyone, but also kind of time is money. So I don't really like going to the grocery store. Just fun fact about me.
Mhm.
So I get my groceries delivered. But from a budget perspective, I know exactly how much it's going to cost. It's not like getting to the checkout line and saying, "Oh, I'm just going to buy everything," or send this bag, and you might not feel comfortable doing that. So I can just very easily, right, know exactly how much groceries are going to be, and if it's a little more, right, just reduce that and click checkout.
Yeah. No, that's good, and it's so funny because one of my one of my other mentors, and I might have talked to you about him, Arthur, and I know we've had on the podcast way back. Um, Philip Steele, he always talks about, yes, time is money, but time, and we all know this, time is just one of those assets that it is so finite and is really worth way more than money. Because once you have the money, you kind of want your time back, right? And that's what you're kind of doing, and in essence of what you talked about, right? So I love that you say that. Say that if you can drop that gem, is it like, do you do a certain grocery store? Maybe they deliver. Do you do Instacart? Like, what do you do? Maybe on average, how much does it cost? And maybe you've done it for a while and you see the return on investment, like that time back. How's that been going for you?
Yeah, so, it goes well for me. I'm kind of a person who likes to buy groceries for the whole month and then eat all of them, right? So it forces me to like go through them. It's like, oh, I don't like this, but this is all that's left. Just helps to also reduce waste because it's also the at least worst feeling for me to buy something and then have to throw it away, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But I mean, in terms of groceries, it's of course changed over time. I now am buying, right? It's me and my girlfriend, so we live together. So it's buying groceries for two. It can be, 400, $450, right? A month, somewhere around there. But, I can remember, and groceries have gone up, but paying like, $200 a month for groceries. So, I mean, that's more than double, plus some inflation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, those are the numbers. It'll depend on right how much you cook and how much you eat out.
Hmm.
But just kind of setting and forgetting that on the grocery front. But I also, at work, I work for a company that has really subsidized like lunch. And so I know people say, "Oh, take your lunch to work," and I'm like, again, with the time and how cheap lunch is at work, it's actually better for me to buy lunch every day, spending I'll average like $8 and I can have sushi, I can have a Philly cheesesteak sandwich, right? I mean, I can have like a full lunch and variety every day with changing menus, but that's kind of a work benefit. So, I mean, that's just kind of answering your question on the grocery
Yeah,
front. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Awesome. So I always like to say, in regards to a lot of situations, like everything in life, there's a balance. We talked a little bit about your budget. Um, Personally, you have a couple areas that you like to put a little more money towards than the average person. And that's kind of the beauty of individual budgets. Everyone has
Yeah.
different interests and they like to allocate maybe, a little more funds to maybe their specific interests. Is there anywhere in particular that you don't have those interests and you like to really reel it in to save a couple bucks so that you can then move those funds to something you are interested in, like eating out or I don't know, anything else that you like to do?
Yeah, so as much as I like spending money, I feel like a lot of stuff should be free. And so I try and take advantage of deals and doing, I would say one is the credit card hacking. So paying for trips and
mm,
vacations, right? I will take all of my expenses, going out, gas, right? Groceries, rent, put it on the credit card to be able to then, have the points, right, to pay
mm,
for, right, plane ticket. But then also, right, I'm going to try and wrap up or um, rack up as many points to then get a companion pass, like on the airline. So then someone else can fly for free with me. So really just lining up and taking advantage of rewards programs. Because I'm like, shouldn't have to pay for this if I can get it for free. Also, I do that with what can be costly, like subscription services for pick your favorite streaming service. I actually have
mm.
all of them, but I only pay for like one. So I mean, we all do this. Find 10 of your friends, right? Swap all of your accounts, but don't pay for all of those services because it's a quick way for it to go down the drain. So I try not to pay as much for entertainment. Even another example I'll give. So I put money towards donations and I contribute to the Smithsonian. I contribute to
Oh,
nonprofits like National Society of Black Engineers. But then I get invited to events for free as a donor. And so now that serves as like entertainment. I'm going to special events, night at the museum, right, that are exclusive, but otherwise I wouldn't have access to. right? So this entertainment piece I really like, but don't like to pay for.
Yeah. Wow, that's unique. I didn't even know you could do that with the night at the museum like that. That's a real, like, it's a movie, but it's a real thing.
Yeah,
That's actually
yeah,
really,
it's
really cool.
real. Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's
That's awesome.
real.
And so now one thing I kind of not necessarily want to like completely pivot to, but one thing I want to touch on is kind of realize is that on this podcast we tend to have a lot of like entrepreneurs, right, who are like killing it with their business, whatever. And you are, I think the term is like intrapreneur, right? You're very much killing it
Sure.
in your space in your career, which is awesome. Like you are an absolute just killer when it comes to entrepreneurship, right? And so one question I'll ask you again, as I'm about to start to a degree my intrapreneurship journey, right? Is do you see how can I phrase it? Because what's really unique about the mindset that I have now and kind of the knowledge that I know is I'm going through like my new company's benefits package, and I know every term. I'm analyzing. I'm trying to like get the match. I'm maxing out things. I'm looking at opening all these accounts. It's just really taking advantages that the average person is just like will not like they're gonna sleep on, right? And so I like it's just super fun, right? So I'm curious, like, did you? Okay, I guess we already kind of talked about the information that probably you knew back then, but like what with your knowledge and your background, right? How do you what are some tips you would give for future entrepreneurs, current entrepreneurs like myself, to really take advantage of like what corporate America has to offer? Things from like your 401k match, your HSA, your FSA, your like just the whole night, because you've been in this industry for a while, you've been in this game for a while. Like what are some of those things that entrepreneurs like myself now are going to have to just take advantage of if you want to, win the game, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to take advantage of, and you also may have access to these items at different points in your career as you advance. If you're trying to, pursue right the corporate career trajectory, certainly starting out, the no-brainers are the 401ks and getting the company match. But a common mistake that I've fortunately got some coaching. I didn't make this mistake, but I've seen a lot of people do this, right? When you select where you want that money to go in your 401k, some people are like, oh, I want to retire as soon as possible. And they pick some type of fund that has, right, a date or year like 5 years out because they're like, oh, this is the strategy. They don't realize, right, the risk associated, right, or not the low risk associated with that type of fund, but they just don't have the knowledge. But take advantage of that, right, and set a very risk, um, pick a portfolio that can stand a lot of risk, right, further out. That's just like a no-brainer out the gate. But the other piece I would say is actually earlier in your career, taking advantage of the development that the company has, because that's also kind of like free money. And that's
Yep.
something I was able to do. So I worked and went to grad school full time a few years after I started working, and they paid 100% for my master's degree and
Wow.
allowed me to work a flex schedule. And right, I mean, you can't beat that because we know how much graduate degrees cost in engineering, right? You can look that up. But to be able to work, gain income, and upskill, right, is an immediate return. And then I know sometimes we think about, do I change jobs, right, to make more money, right? Or do I stay, right, and try and grow within my company? And something that I think is important to do to kind of be entrepreneurial is actually think about the experiences that you're gaining and the value of that in the market. Because sometimes it's better to stay and make two jumps in your next role because you're getting so much experience and something that's highly valued and have a little delayed return than immediately upskilling and like, oh, I should be up for a promotion in 1 year or 1.5 years, and getting that immediate return versus waiting and being able to move further.
That's a great point there too regarding jumping jobs or staying at the same company. I've noticed a lot of people in our generation, especially in the engineering and tech fields, will job hop every 2 to 5 years and use that increased title to go to another company and get a raise. How do you feel about using that strategy?
I mean, I'm absolutely supportive of that strategy. If you have multiple goals, right? If you have very aggressive financial goals, and career goals, you're going to get the greatest return moving to a new organization, right? Because this is just the math, right? The internal um, rate of salary increase is just lower than if you move to another organization, because they have to pay to attract you to leave, right? Because why leave, right? This is just a part of talent management. So you're going to get the greatest increases moving to other organizations. However, I'll just accentuate the point I made earlier. Um, don't just think about your next move, think about two moves, right? Do I
Mm,
need to make a move now, or do I need to wait and then be able to make, right, that double jump, right, with my next move? And I think some people move too soon and don't realize that maybe there's not an opportunity in their current company to get promoted, but they're getting hella crazy experience that would
mm,
allow them to make a bigger jump if they stay.
mm.
That's the mistake.
No, that's good. That's good. And when I hear that, it's very reminiscent of the book again I mentioned earlier, which is The Linchpin, the book you put me on,
Oh,
Arthur.
sure.
Right? Great book where again you're so good in an organization that they cannot replace you. Right? It would be a huge detriment to that organization if you were to leave. And so, being that linchpin again, definitely a book to recommend, as it was recommended to me by Arthur himself. Really put yourself out there, but make sure you're providing so much value that a company would have to, if you were to leave, they're gonna just fight tooth and nail to keep you there, right? Or they actually can't function if you were to be done, right? So I love that a lot. Very reminiscent of Lynchpin, what I was hearing right there. So one thing I want to kind of circle all the way back to, you mentioned at the beginning, because I kind of want to go back to how we met, right? You mentioned how Yinka stalked you. Absolutely hilarious. May or may not be true. But when I met you again, this was via like I think Nesby 47 online during COVID, right? And it was super awesome because I think if I remember this correctly, there was some sort of contest going on with one of the, again, Nesby standing for National Society of Black Engineers, Arthur being I think is it the Nesby professional president?
Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
the chair
The
is,
chair.
but equivalent to the president. Yep.
Okay, very cool. Right. And so I think at the time, I don't believe you were in that position right then, but you're working very closely with HISIG, right? Which is Health Innovation Special Interest Group, one of the several special interest groups that NESB has to offer. And I remember when we were talking, or even before talking, there was this competition, and I saw that like I think something with social media, or if you attend multiple events virtually, you either get like a gift bag, or you get into a giveaway or something. But the ultimate one is you get time, you have a meeting with like Arthur. I was like, oh, I gotta know this guy. Like I'm the kind of guy I sure stalk, but like I will find the most valuable people and I will pinpoint them and I'll get them. And I got them, right? And so it's so funny because when I initially met you, you just provided so much value. You wanted to meet, you had time. You probably didn't have the time, but you set aside time just to pour back in, like you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, right? And so again, with Nesby, I just want to say, even for a lot of, just a quick gem for a lot of people, like if you're a college student, or even if you're again at your career level, intrapreneur, right? There are several types of organizations your company probably has with D&I initiatives, right? Again, diversity and inclusion. Like, be a part of things because you never really know who you're going to meet. And then if you're a part of those things, try your best to find the biggest fish in that pond and have them either be a friend, an associate, a mentor, a mentee, whatever, right? And so I just want to say, being a part of Nesby, even when I was at my collegiate, and I can say that when I was, because I'm not in it anymore, which is awesome. But collegiate
Congrats.
level, right? Nesby has provided so much value to me, right? Going to these Nesby conferences I mentioned in the past, having been to a virtual one when I met Arthur, and then having been, to two other ones. Literally just came back from one less than like 2.5 months ago or 2 months ago in Kansas City, Missouri. Great time, right? And so even with Nesby, I just want to make this other quick point. I think what was really awesome that I even personally experienced was that I applied to, I think, Nesby every two times a year, like in the fall and the spring, I have like scholarships, right? And I applied, I think it was like a spring scholarship for like a company, I think it was like GE or something. And I ended up getting it was like a $5,000 scholarship, right? So I came into a lot of money really quickly, which is really cool. And what's awesome about that scholarship, even though it was academic related, it came directly to my checking account. So I can actually do anything with it, right? And so when I got that, I was like, okay, financial plays. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is like, even with my offer, so going back to the entrepreneur kind of thing, even with my offer that I got from my company now, like I am just constant, not necessarily obsessing, but like I'm enjoying like just looking at and kind of having a whole 1 year play of what I want to do with it, right? Getting the match and not necessarily maxing out just yet, but matching, getting maybe up to 10% in like a 401k, or maxing out the Roth IRA, opening up the HSA, or FSA, doing all these things, right? And it's like these kind of financial plays, we love to tell people like get in the habit of budgeting, because that's exactly what a budget is, right? It's making players their money prior to even getting it, right? And so kind of the next thing I want to pivot to, right, is what is Arthur doing maybe outside? I know you said you do things with other organizations. You mentioned Nesby. You do a lot at your work, which is awesome. Provide a ton of value. Absolutely are that linchpin, right? What are some other things that maybe Arthur's cooking? What's a future play? I guess really the question is, because I just talked about financial plays, right? Do you have any kind of financial plays, career plays? And maybe obviously you don't have to open up your whole can of worms to us, right? Because it might be personal plays, but anything you can tell us, right? What are some things that you're working on? I know there might be something in the works with a future spouse, right? What are just some future things that Arthur has kind of cooking up?
Yeah, I mean, I said a lot of things in the kitchen cooking.
Okay.
So, but happy to share, about any of them. But you talked about, right, budgeting and having a plan and setting up a play. And, I just wanted to give a little more context there in terms of how I think about it, because you can put together a budget. But mostly you start with, or people might start with, hey, this is how much I earn, right? And then, you know, I'm going to save some percentage and then allocate the rest to spend. But I'd like to think about it through the framework and moving towards levels of financial freedom, right? And
Mm,
really like, what are the definitions for that? And, there's lots of good writing out there about that, but I like what,
yeah.
Joshua Sheets, I think he's probably the person who's coined the levels.
Mm,
And essentially, right, you're moving from ultimate dependence to being able to cover your expenses to being debt free. And so, I'm through those levels, right, of debt free. But then financial security is like having enough investment income to cover your living expenses. And
mhm,
then independence, right, covering all your current lifestyle.
mhm,
So that's where I'm trying to get, right? Having enough investments where not through, right, my salary, but through investments, right, and interest, et cetera, from that, or passive income, right? Me not
mhm,
working, I can cover my lifestyle.
mhm.
And that's actually a number, right? You can look at the lifestyle you have or want, calculate that number, and then that becomes your target. And then I know how hard I need to work to increase my salary, or I know how much more I need to get in investments to hit a target. And so I just wanted to provide the framing that it's not just having this budget play, but like what's really the target.
Mhm.
And so what I'm working on
That's
now,
good.
right, while I think the job is in a good place, is, creating a business. So I do want to do some consulting. So this is a goal like for 2023 to
Mhm.
do consulting for early phase companies in tech and biotech. And then the other goal is more long term, but the short term is building my brand as an executive, right? I'm not currently an executive, but a senior director level, to then get invited to be on like the boards of organizations with in a paid board seat, right? Versus kind of a volunteer board seat.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the short term professional play.
Yeah.
Um,
Very cool. No, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, right? Because I
yeah,
think this is something that, it's very reminiscent. If I was kind of looking through my notes too as we were talking, because I'm pretty sure you sent me a while back, and I know I try to keep everything that's of value people sent me that's like really good and I want to reference in the future in like my whole note system, right? I was trying to look through as you were talking. And so with the levels of wealth, I'm pretty sure it was you that sent me, it was a link and there was like multiple levels of literally like this wealth. I think it was like certain ages, right? It was like 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, or
sure.
something like that. Was that what it was?
Yeah. there's so much stuff, but there is something similar, right? As you're thinking about the stages, they often align with, right, the decades of your life. And, when you're, I mean, you can say, take your current age, think about where you were 10 years ago, and then think about how old you'll be in 10 years. And either way, you're going to look back and be like, 10 years ago, I was young, and 10 years from now, oh, I'm going to be old.
Yeah.
But the things you care about and kind of your purpose aligns a lot with those phases. And so I think in your 20s, you're like, you might be saying, I'm trying to survive, right? I'm in my 30s, but closer to right 40. And I think it's about success and really like your key strength that you're good at and leaning into that. And then matching that with like your financial plan.
Mhm. No, that's good. Yeah, and again, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I'm gonna have to reference that again because again, almost nearing my second decade of my life, and I want to try to see if I'm aligned to that, right? Which I think is really, really cool, and I appreciate you sharing that, right? So one thing I want to pivot to now again, and I referenced this a couple times, but I'll bring it up again, and so we can talk about it. Is you said you have a girlfriend, which is awesome, right? And you and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
we've
yeah.
been texting back and forth
Mhm.
with that, which is great. And so are you and like kind of the financial potential spouse or girlfriend conversation? Are you having that with her? What is that sounding like? Is there cooperation? Is there pushback? Like anything you can share about that, right? Are you guys having kind of those financial conversations?
Yeah, we are having those conversations. And it's kind of started with, so, I mean, what we've talked about, but might be beneficial to others, is really just talking about the future that you envision. Because fortunately or unfortunately, there's often a cost, right, to the lifestyle you want to have. And so, whereas I mentioned, so what's kind of in the future? So we want to get right married, have a house, have children, all of this. Um, but one vision that we kind of have is for our children, they'll study a language in, whatever school they go to, but then we'll have this family like study abroad immersion experience in some house we'll have in pick favorite country,
Mhm.
right? And I'm like, that's gonna cost a lot. I don't make enough, right, for that today.
Yeah.
Um, so, how do we share in those expenses? So, my girlfriend, she actually is an entrepreneur and she has her own
Come on.
business and consulting company that she runs. And so, not only do we think about, hey, how do I grow my career, right? But how do we also think about growing and scaling your business to have these lifestyles? But it's about balance, right? And having partnership. I'm obviously working in a company that requires me to kind of be in the office or in the office at times. But she has a flexible schedule, right? She can work from home. If I need to relocate, she could relocate because the business can move with her. And these are the types of, you know, that seems like it will work for us. But having that conversation just puts expectations out there, right? Which is the key conversation to have.
Mhm. No, that's good, and I appreciate you sharing that a lot because the reason I brought that up is even just doing a lot of traveling myself, and my girlfriend accompanying me, which you've met her, Arthur and Zach and Sean know her as well. Karen, big shout out to her, love her. We did a lot of traveling, like I mentioned, these past couple weeks, and so it was a lot of car driving and traveling. I need to be more specific, and so hours on end, right? We have time to kill, so we're having like as you know me, I'm a big finance guy, so it's going to come up.
Mhm.
And it's come up several times, but we have like a lot of good time just to talk about it, shell it out. I'm driving. She pulls up the note app. We're talking about, when she graduates next year, what she, plans, what she, is expecting to make, what I'm currently making. And then now, I don't know, I never know if I'm using this term right. Extrapolating, it just sounds really cool. We're doing the math and kind of, far thinking what it's going
Right.
to look like because we also have goals, the family, the maybe a car, a house, location, whatnot, right? But then again, all these things have timelines in terms of like before 30, you know, uh, uh, marriage or whatever, all these things, right? And so you think about it, you look at these numbers, it's like, oh man, we want to have a house by 2029. It's 2023. That's 6 years. We think about, the kind of house, the location, and then you do like, 20% down payment, divide that by, 72 or whatever, right? You kind of do all these
Right.
things. It starts to get fun. But just the fact that you're having the conversation, I think is very, very, important and is kind of the first big step you have to have, right? Because it's not going to be perfect by any means. But the fact you're having the conversation, I think that's better than your average couple, right? And so saying all this and having this conversation makes me think of, and I'm wondering if you watched it, because I've watched it by myself. I've watched it now with my girlfriend as well. Is Ramit Sethi's How to Get Rich series on Netflix, and this is the first time I'm talking about it because I think again we haven't had a podcast in a little while, just a little bit of hiatus. We're doing a lot of traveling, but from our last podcast to this podcast, I've watched the whole series twice, and watching it a second time, I've learned a lot that I didn't catch the first time, right? And if you've watched it yet, and I won't do any spoilers, but like it's so interesting, and I'm so excited for other seasons because you see a lot of couples on that series that they're probably older than you, Arthur, obviously older than us, but they're not even having those conversations, let alone even probably making money that we're making. But it's just like I hear that and I see that, and I'm like, I'm so grateful and thankful, number one, to know the things that I know, but then have a equally as competent partner and willing partner to have those kinds of conversations, right? So I just say all this to say that if you're a listener out there, whether you have a partner now or you plan to have a partner in the future, the earlier the better. Number one, that this information, but number two, you can have that with your partner because it's imminent. Like it's going to happen whether you like it or not, and it's better to have the conversations before you have the money and you're in debt, so you don't even get to that point, right? So I love that you shared that, and I love that you're having those conversations. I'm super happy to hear that because everything you're telling me about her, it seems like she's the one, which is really, really good.
Yeah,
So
it is key, and
yeah,
I don't, maybe just one more point,
yeah,
because I think we made it sound very positive and fun. These are not sexy
that's
conversations,
true. Good point.
right? So often you're disagreeing, and there are lots of disagreements, right? So I mean, just an example, right? My girlfriend doesn't like driving. She sold her car, like doesn't have a car. Um, I have a car. I love driving. So how are you going to work it out with one car, right? You got to have that conversation. Or, right, I'm perfectly fine with, you know, literally chores like in cleaning. But she's like, hey, time and value of, right, money value of time. She's like, no, we should probably pay for
Hmm,
a cleaning service. And I'm like, no, that's a
that's
waste of
good.
money. Like I have two
Yeah,
perfectly good hands. So
yeah.
you're going to have conflict, and you have to, find out what works for you. Right.
Mhm. That's good. And I want to go somewhere with that because I think I like this a lot, right? Because I think this is a group of four people who are in a relationship of one entrepreneur, one intrapreneur, right? All four of us, right? And I think that's really, really unique, right? So I want to hear more of what you just expounded on. If you can expound on that further, you said your girlfriend is primarily an entrepreneur and you are primarily an entrepreneur, right? And I guess I can speak for myself personally. I don't know if I'm a primary one or the other. I know a lot of my time's going more towards the entrepreneur stuff right now, but I'm super excited to now have some more time to do some more entrepreneur kind of things. But nonetheless, right, your girlfriend made a comment saying that the time value of money. I wonder that was from her entrepreneur mindset, coming from I would rather pay for this, I have more time to do X, that would give me more ROI. When you said, hold on, but I have two hands, I might have the time and maybe I enjoy doing it, right? And so I love that a lot, and I want to, if you can expound on that any way you can, I would like to hear more about that. Please, yeah, if you have any more examples, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that, right? From the lens of, a simple example, if she could spend more time, right, working from home or remotely or her favorite location on a proposal that's gonna win, some large sum of money, an hour doing that, right, is, worth paying for a cleaning service to come in to clean for 2 or 3 hours, right, where she doesn't have to do that. Or she really loves travel. I mean, I like travel, but by comparison, it would be like I hate travel compared to the level that she loves travel. And so it's like, or, right, I can just spend time on a beach, right? And have that experience and not have to worry about other expenses. So I think it is both quality of lifestyle, but also I could spend that time earning something that's higher value and pay someone else.
Hmm, hmm. And that's really good. And again, just more appreciation for all those things you're sharing, because even as I think about my relationship and everybody else with relationships on this call as well, it's a really valuable thing to kind of think about, and you have forward thinking for a relationship. I appreciate you sharing that. So as we wrap up here, before I get into the last couple questions, What are some, I know we talked about a lot of things, a lot of valuable things. Again, I said this, I prefaced this, you're a man of value, so I appreciate you having the podcast. Man, super, just gems after gems. Hopefully you guys are picking them up. If not, rewind, pick them up because they're there. Right. So what are some maybe last gems before we get in our last, couple questions that are going to have gems as well? What are some of those gems financially that you would tell yourself if you were our age, right? Early 20s, like, hey, do this. Like you, and maybe we've heard it a ton of times, but maybe act like you're not speaking to us, like to our listeners, right? Maybe this is their first on the fly podcast they listen to, and they have the pleasure of listening to Arthur first, right? Which is going to get them to listen to a ton more because you're a gem, right? What are those financial gems? Just a couple of them. Hey, make sure you do this.
Yeah, there's a couple that I would make sure I did and recommend to everybody. It's the 80-10-10 kind of rule, saving 10% of your money, donating 10%, and living off the 80%, and doing it, in that order before you get to the 80%. I wasn't able to do that when I first started working, but that was the goal. So it might be, hey, just where you are, or the cost of living, or debt you might have, student loans. You can't yet save 10% because it makes more sense to only save 5% and pay down your debt. But understand what that ratio would look like in your budget. And then every time you get some more money, get into alignment with that percentage. That's helped me so
That's good.
much, because then what happens is there's going to become a point, this magic point, where that ratio checks out. And then you're going to get on the other side of that and be earning more money, and just return on dividends from that practice. And you're going to be able to then decide where you want to place, right, more money, to keep that ratio. So I think that's one key gem. The other is to get a financial advisor, right? I mean, that might seem like a no-brainer. There are lots of them out there. So, do some research, continue to listen to, right, the podcast here, but have an advisor so that you can learn, and someone who you feel like can teach you, not just manage your funds. And so that was something that I got very early on, working with an advisor who I could just sit and have conversation with and not make any movements in my portfolio. But then trust them, right, to follow the strategy based on my goals.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'll start with, those two.
Yeah. No, that's really good, right? And I think the first one, I wanted to touch on something there. I think 10% of that, I love that you talked about. Well, I mean, all of it, but I'm talking about the percent
Mhm.
80-10-10, right? And so you said 10% giving, 10% saving, 80%, spending your lifestyle, which I think is awesome. And something I'll touch on just very quickly is, like I mentioned, in this, like a lot of driving that I did like this past week, is looking over this like kind of 1 year play of this upcoming money for, full-time stuff. I'm looking at it, right? And I'm like, because I'm a Christian, so I tithe 10%. But like this is a 10% I haven't seen before. What I'm saying? It's 10%, but percentages, they're subjective, right? Or they're objective. But what I'm looking at with this 10%, like, oh wow, that's still 10%, but like that's a lot of 10%. Like I haven't seen that comparatively, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like I kind of look at it like, oh, I could use that for something. But it's like, hold on, you kind of go back to your values on, okay, well, what do number one, it's 1/10 of what you make. So it's like you have 9/10 to still do stuff with. But it's like there's a bigger purpose when you give. So whether it's a tithe, charity, anything, whether it's something that's bigger than yourself, I think that's a huge gem. I also want to kind of like a sub gem I wanted to tell our listeners is, please, it's a great practice. Whatever you want to do, just give, if you can, 10%. Even I think I read, if you're most likely familiar with Dave Ramsey, just talking about like even when you're paying off debt or when you're going through a big financial struggle, still continue to tithe. Right? It's just a beautiful thing. But again, whether you're religious or not, giving 10%. I love that you shared that, Arthur, and I just want to make that a point for our listeners. Continue to give, because it's you're not just doing it for it to come back to you, but you're doing it because it's something that's bigger than yourself. And at the end of the day, it's 1/10 of what you make. You have 9/10. I think that's the thing that really made sense to me. Like, I still have 9/10 of all the things. 1/10. It's not nothing. It's going to make a big difference in someone else's life, but I'm good with my 9/10. So I just wanted to kind of make that point. And so the second point as well, make sure that financial advisor also is fiduciary status, right? They have your what you want in mind is top of mind for them, right? They're doing things that's in accordance with what you would like. So make sure you tap into that, right? Look for that fiduciary status. So thank you for sharing that, Arthur. So again, as you wrap up here, last 3 quick questions or 4 questions, depending on the time we have. So first question, right? And I already kind of talked about with a certain book you put me on, right? Lynchpin, beautiful book. The question is, what is that one book that, people should be reading, right? Could be financial, could be self-help, could be whatever. What is that one book? And hopefully it's not Lynchpin. And if it is, if it is, you can talk about it. But what is that one book that everybody needs to read?
No, I have plenty of book recommendations. I mean, one that I just completed reading, which I highly recommend, is 12-Week Year. And it's a book that's been out a while, actually, but it's by Brian Moran and it's a co-author, Michael Lennington. And anyway, it's around, essentially, it's a self-help kind of productivity book. And the concept is, it's a known fact, right? We set annual goals often, right? But we get the most work done in the last 2 months of the year, magically, right? And
Mhm.
so it's how do you change the periods, right, for your goal setting in your life to basically shorten that to 12 weeks so that you can have more years in the actual calendar year. And then whatever your goals are, right, whether they're personal, professional, financial, you can actually get to them much faster and measuring against that target than how we might traditionally set our goals. So highly recommend that.
Good, good. I haven't read it, just added to my list, and that was 12-week year. I love that. Thank
You
you for
got
sharing
it.
that. Next question, you kind of talked about goals, right? As we enter almost half the year, which is crazy to think about, right? What is that one goal? And you may or may not have already executed. Knowing you, you're a big executor, right? What is that one goal that Arthur set out to execute on at the beginning of the year that maybe you're still working on? But like, what is that one goal that you're looking forward to executing on prior to the conclusion of 2023, if you're able to share?
Yeah, it's really in the area of health and fitness. So, I mentioned I've been in the gym, so I'm 4 weeks into kind of consistently going to the gym,
That's awesome.
but investing in my health and working with a personal trainer specifically.
Mm,
And I mean, just for a number of reasons, right? I'm committed to a lot of different things. And if you don't have your health and physical fitness right, how do you keep producing? But also, right, post the pandemic, I've been sitting a lot and I've gained some weight. So certainly want to get off a few pounds, but just have that energy and health for the long term, right? To be able
yeah.
to make good on all the things I'm investing in.
No, absolutely, absolutely. We're a big proponent on that. All of us, big fitness buffs here at FLI too. Is like we want to amass wealth, but if you don't amass your health, you're not going to be able to enjoy that wealth, right? So
Mhm.
absolutely love that you stated that, and I love that goal, and I'm gonna keep you accountable to that now that I know that. I
Yeah.
love that a lot. Love that a lot. And then second to last question now, since we have a little bit of time for it. What is one person that maybe you don't know, maybe it's an influencer you follow? Because even with FLI and On the Fly podcast, we have some pretty good reach with the people we're pulling on, right? When we pulled you on, but also we've had some amazing guests, within this past year and 2023 or 2022. But like, what is one guest you're like, hey, you guys should really try your best to reach out to them? And maybe somebody maybe somebody you don't, but you would like to maybe see on the podcast. Who's one guest you want to see on the podcast?
One person that immediately comes to mind is a friend and finance guru who I've known for a long time. Her name is Kezia Williams, and she's the CEO of an organization called Black Upstart. And then she's also on all like social media channels, so she's very easy to find, and always talking about just finance hacks, best practices. But her sweet spot is really kind of coaching up and coming entrepreneurs, early stage companies.
Okay. Yeah, you're gonna have to share me with her contact. That would be awesome.
Mhm.
Easy. Okay, very cool. Thank you for that. And speaking of contact, last question. Where can our listeners find you at? They probably resonate with a lot of things that you said, whether it's social media, wherever. Where can our listeners connect with you?
Oh, yeah. I'm also easy to find. My website is arthuredge.com. It's the same handle on LinkedIn and Instagram, Arthur Edge, and then on Twitter, it's Edge_Arthur. But if you go to the website, you can find all those, arthuredge.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Arthur. No, tonight, again, gem filled like I anticipated. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Sean and Zach, if you have any last words, I just want to just say, Arthur, you've been an absolute outstanding, catalyst in my life. I'm looking forward to continue on our conversations, hold you accountable with your fitness goals and whatnot, and see, the whole relationship bloom. But again, I thank you for your time tonight.
Absolutely. Arthur, thanks for your time.
My pleasure,
Yes,
guys.
sir. And I second what Zach and Yinka said. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate all the value that you brought to the episode today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Arthur. So again, we had Arthur Edge, an amazing individual. Please connect with them. This was On the Fly podcast, a Financial Literacy Institute podcast. We thank you for listening. We do this for you guys, and we're looking forward to seeing you on the next one.